Who's ready for some shogi? Okay, I know it's not really any of you. In fact, I'd be honestly surprised if I have more than 3 or 4 viewers who care about shogi in general, not just this particular game. But if you're cataloging everything, then you play everything. And I will say that Shogi Shodan Icchokusen has a couple of interesting features. Since this is the first shogi game on the PC Engine, and so the first shogi game of this series, let me remind you of how the game works. Thousands of years ago, a board game was developed in India, and as it spread west, it developed into chess, and as it spread east, it became xianqi. And then it got to Japan, where it became shogi. Shogi never got much attention beyond Japan, but it holds the same cultural niche that those other games have in their areas. A board game that's an intellectual pursuit and requires a great deal of skill. Shogi is played on a 9x9 grid, with each player starting with the same set of pieces arranged in the same configuration. The goal is to capture your opponent's king, or at least threaten them with capture in a way that the opponent can't escape. In other words, put them in checkmate. Most pieces in shogi have a lot more limited movement than pieces in chess. However, they can have their movement upgraded. By reaching the 3 back ranks of the board, you can turn the piece over after it moves, changing them to a new piece that has more movement options. The other big difference between shogi and the other chess-like games is that you can use any pieces that you've captured. For your move on your turn, you can take a captured piece and just put it down on the board. It's one of the more challenging aspects of shogi to wrap your head around if you're used to other games, and it makes sacrifice plays a lot more difficult. This is something that makes shogi more strategically complicated than other games of this style. On the other hand, shogi pieces have a lot more restricted movement than other games, which tends to make shogi play a lot slower. As for the pieces, you start with a full row of pawns, and these can only move 1 square straight ahead, and that's also how they capture. Then in the second row of your pieces, you have the bishop, and they can move as many spaces as you need on a diagonal. On the opposite side of the board is the rook, which can move as many spaces as you like, horizontally or vertically. Then at the back row, starting from the outside and working our way in, there's the lance that can move any number of spaces, but only forward. And those 3 pieces are the only pieces that have that kind of unlimited movement. Next are the knights, and while these move like knights, unlike chess knights, it's always 2 squares forward, 1 square to the side. No 2 squares to the side and then 1 square forward. And of course this movement can jump over pieces that are in the way. Next are the silver generals, who can move to any 3 squares in front of them, and the 2 diagonal squares behind them. The gold general can move to any 3 squares in front of them, the 2 squares to the side, and the 1 square directly behind them. So some overlap in the general's movements, but with gaps, so don't get them backwards. Finally, there's the king in the middle, and of course the king can move to any adjacent square. And that's how you play shogi. Don't expect me to repeat this when I get to later shogi games. Shogi Shodan Icchokusen offers 5 different modes of play. Skipping past the versus mode, there's a story mode based on Momotaro, the legendary boy born from a peach who went off to kill a bunch of ogres. In that mode, you have to defeat 4 different ogres at shogi. The next mode has you playing a more difficult opponent, and there's a game clock running. So you have 20 minutes to play all of your moves. Finally, there's a mode where you're trying to break out of the amateur leagues, become a Shodan, or first level Dan, the very lowest rank of the expert shogi players. You have to beat the examiner in 3 consecutive matches before you're allowed to say you're at that level. And then the final mode is just expert play. You're playing against the computer at its highest difficulty, and for these last 2 modes, you're on a game clock, but your opponent is not, and you're given a certain number of seconds per move, depending on how many games you've won to that point. There is a menu if you press start, but you can only suspend play, turn off and on the background music, and resign. Shockingly, nobody in Japan seems to remember that Shogi Shodan Icchokusen even exists. You are currently watching the most popular video on the internet about it. And if I'm the most popular, then you know that nobody cares. My own feeling here is it's not even the best Shogi game on the PC Engine. It's fine for what it does, but it's very bare bones. The best thing about it is the story mode, and even that is just some cutscenes and character portraits. Home Data was a company that specialized in these kinds of traditional games, and Shogi was one of their big lines, so they did make a second Shogi game on the PC Engine. And that one is an improvement. Shogi Shodan Icchokusen is a Shogi game that fulfills the need of being a Shogi game. But if you wanted anything more, then you needed to look elsewhere.